Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing a character who has been hotly contested in terms of his power ever since the start of Dragon Ball Z, even back when Akira Toriyama was putting pen to paper and drawing the very first chapter of Dragon Ball. People were already debating just how powerful this incredibly important character is in the story, and this character who is more long-lived than perhaps Goku himself. And that would have to be, how powerful is Pui Pui? Or, well, I guess was he before Vegeta vaporized him? Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss that. But before I begin, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications. That way you could stay up to date with all my future videos. Additionally, make sure to leave a like, share this video out, stick around for the entire time, because that way it'll help the channel to grow even stronger, to go even further beyond, along with your subscription, that much more. And, well, obviously, you'll get a much better context of everything I have to say. Plus, if I shout out a bunch of videos during the course of this video, you could check them all out in the corner in the top right and down below the description. But with that being said, let's get into this incredibly important video about Pui Pui. So when we were first introduced to Pui Pui, Babidi's foremost henchman, and by foremost I mean the first one that we actually get to have somebody fight, we see that he demonstrates his power significantly when he goes to fire an attack at Spopovich's friend, Yamu. Well, we don't really know if they're friends. They're both mentally enslaved by Babidi and had their powers increased from seemingly above average humans to superhumans. And well, he blew him up right then and there, making it to where Babidi had to praise his incredible accuracy and power when he said, "Nice shot." And shocking Gohan in the process, who for some reason completely forgets that pretty much every single villain in this franchise kills their own men. After this, we get to see Babidi's power of his minion, his very strongest minion, of course, up close and personal, where we see that Pui Pui goes on to fight against Vegeta, the Saiyan Prince, the vegetable man himself. And at this point, Pui Pui, well, he seems pretty confident in his power. He's about to hocus pocus himself a victory in his eyes. You get the pun? Hopefully. If you read the manga, you probably do. And then we see that Supreme Kai, when all this is occurring, is actually very concerned about all this. He seems to think that Vegeta fighting him on his own is going to be a mistake, and he's telling them, don't underestimate Babidi. He has strong fighters. Now, a lot of people seem to believe that Shin is actually afraid of Pui Pui and his power. And so a lot of people will say that he's actually stronger than Pui Pui, or, you know, strike that and reverse it like Willy Wonka, and that he's weaker than Pui Pui, which means that Pui Pui would be stronger than the most preeminent god who was introduced at the time in Supreme Kai. But obviously that's wrong if you pay attention to the context. Shin is never once afraid of Pui Pui at all. In fact, he just is afraid that Vegeta will, you know, be defeated because he's underestimating one of Babidi's fighters, and then in turn will end up causing Buu to be awoken by having his energy taken, which is the entire objective of them fighting Pui Pui and, you know, Yakan and Deborah along the way. However, with that being said, Goku reassures him, Vegeta gets ready to fight, and we see the battle unfold as Pui Pui goes to attack Vegeta, who easily catches it, and we proceed to get one of the most one-sided beatdowns in the entire franchise, where Vegeta is just, you know, basically literally stomping him with his size, you know, 2 shoes, and then proceeds to just get the better of him, to Supreme Kai's surprise and Goku's, well, he already knew that was going to happen. And we see that at this point, Pui Pui, he starts to have the odds turned in his favor, or at least he thinks so, and so does Babidi, where they're sent to planet Zune, which is directly connected to the ship that they're on with Babidi's magic, and this is Pui Pui's homeworld, where he was actually the champion. He is the champion, my friends. But this is the end of the line for you, he says. This place has 10 10 times Earth's gravity. I was raised on this planet. Kind of funny he's telling Vegeta that, right? And Vegeta, well, he responds in kind. So, is that all you can come up with? Just 10 times gravity? And, in the anime, this is far more extensive, where Vegeta, well, when he first gets attacked by Pui Pui, I love how he just lowers his arms and he lowers his guard because he knows the guy stands zero chance against him in the fight and starts to dodge normally. And then he starts to actually bounce up and down like a boxer, just being like, this is nothing. This feels like nothing, because not only is Vegeta from Planet Vegeta, named after his dad, who's also named Vegeta, and, his dad and other dads before him, but also has 10 times gravity. And Vegeta, well, he's trained in hundreds of times gravity up to this point, so this is nothing for him. So he flies up, and, we see our exit from the incredibly long-lived character who has been around since, Toriyama first saw this franchise, definitely. And we see him get vaporized to the other shock of Supreme Kaioshin, and Babidi. And we see he's saying that he's surprised by such power on display. Now, in terms of Pui Pui's power, it does become kind of difficult for us to know for a fact exactly how strong he is, because again, we have to remember that Pui Pui is up against Vegeta, a character who has been training for his, most of his life at this point, or at least a very large chunk of it ever since he met Goku, and has achieved not only a gigantic base level of power, but additionally Super Saiyan 2, and, that power on top of everything else. However, we do know that because Pui Pui is actually Majin Pui Pui, this means that his power would have to be significantly higher, or at least somewhat higher, than it was when he didn't have that Majin mark. And we could see just how big of a boost it gives some people, including other powers sometimes, with Spopovich when he fights against Videl. Now, in the prior tournament, Spopovich was defeated in the first round. In the anime, they actually show he was beaten by Mr. Satan with ease. And so when he's fighting against Videl, he's clearly seen a giant power-up where he went from that weak level to being able to fight against someone who's started to understand Chi as trained by Gohan, and can even fly, for example. However, this is not the limits of his power, because he also demonstrates some very strange abilities, like, for example, when Videl kicks his head around and then he just snaps it back into place and continues to fight, and eventually beating her down ruthlessly. Even learning how to, or showing off his ability to fly and use Chi Blast. So this is clearly a very large boost that Spopovich got here. In terms of the Majin boost, I discussed in depth in a video you could see in the top right corner of just what exactly it is and how it works. And what we saw when Vegeta became Majin Vegeta, after he had his mind mostly taken over by Babidi, or at least partially, we saw that Babidi then says right here, "This is great, he's already under our control. I'll release his hidden powers and allow him to overcome his limits." So Babidi here is doing basically what occurred with Guru, the Grand Elder on Namek, which caused him to bring out someone's full latent potential. Something that even Vegeta, after all of his intense training, was not able to entirely bring out, because the fact that it was, well, hidden, latent, kind of like what we saw with the character in the bottom left here, Gohan, during the previous arc, where he brought out all of his hidden potential. And again, we see Gohan do something later on in this arc where the Elder Supreme Kai brings it out. However, it's an even greater unlock than what we see here. And this is something that allows Vegeta as Majin Vegeta to actually match up to Goku when he said that Goku had surpassed him by such a degree that he wouldn't be able to normally even be able to fight against him in a competitive way. Of course, he didn't know about Super Saiyan 3 at the time, but chances are Toriyama didn't either. So again, we know that Pui Pui is definitely going to be more powerful than he originally was. And even though it may have not been as big of a boost because, he was already a seemingly very evil character, and I discussed also how powerful Deborah was before the Majin boost in another video you can see in the top right corner, and questioned whether or not he had a giant boost, or because of his evil and the fact that he had been training and was champion of the Demon Realm, had a smaller boost. But either way, we know that Pui Pui here is definitely more powerful than most fighters in the universe. Because according to Supreme Kai, especially based upon different translations, he actually says that Babidi gathers the most powerful evil beings in the universe to his side. Why he didn't gather, let's say, Frieza and his father, for example, that's totally up for debate, I suppose. But the fact of the matter is that he's saying that these characters that our Z fighters are fighting against are some of the most powerful fighters in all of existence, in Universe 7 at least, when it comes to Dragon Ball Super time. And so, as a result, we have to wonder just how powerful would that make Pui Pui. Now, the thing is that in the Dragon Ball story, particularly during the Frieza arc, we actually see that most of the strongest fighters that Frieza has are only really in the tens of thousands. Like, they're, the strongest fighters that he has in his army are the Ginyu Force, for example, with Captain Ginyu only having a power level of 120,000 at his maximum before he tries to take over Goku's and then actually drops because he can't use his body, which I discussed in yet another video in the top right corner. But the fact of the matter is that that would actually kind of line up with what we see from Pui Pui, because after all, he does say that 10 times gravity is significant for him because he was raised on a planet where it was that, and it would be significant for any fighter he's going up against. So the question is, how strong or how weak would that actually make this character? Because we know that all the Saiyans lived on a planet with 10 times gravity, and Goku was able to master 10 times gravity on King Kai's planet when he had a power level below 8,000, not including the Kaioken. So would that suggest that Pui Pui only has a power level in the thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands? Well, that certainly is a possibility, but with that being said, I feel like he probably wouldn't have either been recruited by Babidi, or they wouldn't have made such a significant deal out of his power unless it was definitely higher than that. And of course, that also raised the question of exactly how powerful is base Vegeta, because he's really the one who defines this here. He easily defeats Pui Pui, so he's obviously far more powerful in just his base form, but just how strong has base Vegeta gotten? Is he vastly more powerful than Frieza to where he can one-shot him without even transforming into a Super Saiyan at this point? Or is he still well below that? Like, for example, the Battle of Gods movie suggests with Goku, where he in his base form isn't as strong as Frieza. Well, there is a scene that a lot of people often will use here in the manga, that is when everyone is on their way to the tournament, Gohan asks Vegeta, Goten, and Trunks to not become a Super Saiyan during the tournament. At this point, Vegeta asks why, and they say that they don't want a bunch of paparazzi following them around because they're going to recognize them as Super Saiyans after the battle against Cell that was on TV. Now, Vegeta at this point says something right here, which is, it doesn't matter anyway. In our normal forms, I'm still the strongest. This tournament will be a piece of cake. Now remember, during this point, Piccolo and Android 18 were entering the tournament as well, and both of them were far more powerful than the base form Saiyans in the last arc. Piccolo, for example, was sort of close, or maybe equivalent to Vegeta, even during the Cell games after his 2 times in the chamber, which I discussed in another video about who would actually win between the two. So unless Vegeta got tens or hundreds of times stronger in just his base form during the 7 years, this doesn't really make any sense or line up with the reality of the situation. And so as a result, I think that we could really just disregard this as bravado, and nobody really corrects Vegeta because it's like, well, we would just see this happen anyway. I mean, after all, we see that Piccolo fights against Supreme Kai, or was going to, and then forfeits, and people were saying, now we're going to be able to gauge just how strong this character is when he was fighting against Piccolo, but Goku and everyone had said that they thought he was really strong, and so as a result, that would have to mean that he was at least somewhat equivalent to their Super Saiyan forms, which we also go on to see when he fights against Buu. So the fact of the matter is, I think that this statement should be disregarded as nothing more than Vegeta's bravado and trying to act like he's stronger than he really is, and one shot would probably happen from 18 or Piccolo at this point. So I really don't think, honestly, in my own scaling, that Vegeta and Goku and everyone are really that much stronger or even close to the power of 120 million that Frieza displayed on Namek. They don't have to be, because after all, they achieved a higher base form than Goku and Vegeta had on Namek, maybe tens of times at this point, and then they had other transformations on top of it that make them easily one-shot Frieza, even if they were suppressed mastered Super Saiyans. So I feel like this means that Pui Pui is probably actually weaker than Frieza was on Namek. Even though he does kind of look like Frieza's xenomorph form that we see when he's fighting against Vegeta, the fact of the matter is I don't think he's actually as powerful as Frieza in his, let's say, 50% or 100% power. And for all we know, the reason why Toriyama designed him like the xenomorph form is because the fact that he's actually somewhere equivalent to Frieza's third form, and then he gets blown away. He also kind of looks like a pool and stuff like that, but I feel like Pui Pui is probably a little bit stronger than that. Otherwise, Babidi wouldn't have recruited him, and even if he wasn't anywhere near as powerful as Frieza, that Majin boost could have made him that much stronger. So how powerful was Pui Pui in Dragon Ball Z? Well, I don't think he was very strong at all, as most people would obviously notice because they saw him easily obliterated. However, if you were to put him in some of the earlier arcs, like the Saiyan Saga, most of Namek, he would basically just be unbeatable. It's kind of funny to think, but even if, let's say, he was, somewhere equivalent to, I don't know, Saiyan Saga, Vegeta, and Goku, he would still be able to put up a significant fight against them and stomp everyone that came before that point, right? And if he's a lot stronger and comparable to some of Frieza's forms, for example, which is highly possible, at the end of the day, this would suggest that he would be able to, once again, easily beat everyone on Namek, even Frieza, unless he transforms. So that's all up in the air, though, like Pui Pui's ashes after he got vaporized. Rest in peace. You truly were the champion. But with that being said, guys, let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. How strong do you think Pui Pui, the champion of Planet Zoon, truly was in Dragon Ball Z? Also, if you're new here, consider subscribing, enabling all notifications so you can stay up to date with all my future videos, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Just not for Pui Pui.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.